So Fintan, the fixtures review committee came back on Wednesday, and there was 32 different recommendations. An awful lot to digest. That was the thing that stood out to me. It goes to the GA Central Council in January. The earliest the proposals would come in would be for the 2021 season. So just like if we look at the football, there's two formats have been presented for the senior football structure, both catering for the Tier 2, which we know is going to come in anyway. So one is like 4 provincial competitions with eight teams in each, split into 2 groups of 4. So if you come top, the 2 top teams obviously play each other in provincial championship. Second and third they get through, and then the 4th team they go into the second tier competition. What are your thoughts on this one?
I'm probably more in favour of the other one. I think that would be the optimum, where basically you start off the year with provincial action and the league moves to the spring. Because with all this talk, I suppose, about Champions League format and all that, about how to, I suppose, organise that and what groupings to do. Like, there's a ready-made competition already there with a national ranking system that you can automatically play. And everyone says the league is the best competition. Everyone loves going to it. Different games, it's grown in popularity, especially over the last decade. But I think there's an acceptance with a lot of people saying, wouldn't it be great to have some of these games in the middle of summer? And that's what the second option is basically looking to do. So you'd have, say, February and March for your provincial championships, and they'd be standalone events. And then you'd have the league in summer, and then that would, I suppose, determine the pathway for the All-Ireland Championship for Sam Maguire and whatever your B championship would be. So, like, to me, that's the best option, and I think it's great to see that on the table. But I mean, the stumbling block now is going to be kind of getting through, and I suppose it's how you kind of sell this on the ground. And I suppose the big thing is ultimately for provincial councils, like some championships still do mean an awful lot. I mean, like, I'd say we might look at competitions like maybe the Munster Championship and Leinster are being a bit devalued, but then you look at stuff like Cavan getting to the Ulster final this year in football, Roscommon winning in Connacht, and clearly that meant a lot, and that there was a good bit of significance for kind of players, management and supporters alike there. So I suppose you're putting the proposals out there, but the next stage of the process is going to be the big one. How do you sell it to people around the country?
So if we just jump back to the option that has the provinces all having 8, do you think that would be a huge stumbling block to tell the likes of, right, Donegal, you're dropping down into Connacht, Longford, you're switching over into Connacht, to try and get them all down to 8, because obviously it can't stay as is. Realistically, are we at that stage where the importance of some of those championships has been eroded so much that you kind of have to just grin and bear that? And also, when the GA decide that they want to get a rule through, if we look at the attacking mark and some of the different things, even the lack of transparency in terms of like showing who voted for what at Congress, when the GA want to get something through, they can.
Yeah, like it will take a bit of selling for some of them. I mean, I suppose maybe which county's going to drop out of Ulster will probably be the one. Like, if you're going to do 98 there, then you've other examples you imagine might be an easy enough fit, say, to maybe Longford and Westmeath to go into Connacht. I thought it was interesting that they kind of said yesterday at the press conference they didn't recommend specific counties because they want to consult with them, and I think they don't want to kind of railroad this and kind of hammer it down to people. But definitely think it's worthwhile. It's a good thing to look at and all that, but I just think that's not going to properly, maybe, I suppose, check some of the imbalances that exist. I mean, like, if Dublin are still in an 8-county Leinster, there's still going to be a massive gulf between Dublin and the other counties in Leinster. If Kerry, there's going to be a massive gulf between Kerry and some of the other counties in Munster. I mean, they've won, 7 in a row in Kerry, and Dublin have won whatever in a row in Leinster. So I don't know, does that completely tackle it, that 4x8 format, whereas I think in the other proposal that they put forward, that 4x8 to me looks more competitive and doesn't seem to have those imbalances.
If you're Longford, you're probably thinking, do you know what, there's no look, they're probably unlikely to win any province anyway, but you're thinking, do you know what, I'd love to have a go over in Connacht, because we are never beating Dublin no matter what, but you just never know. If we get our house in order and go into Connacht, there are 3 or 4 teams that we're as good as.
Yeah, because there's, I suppose, unless you're from the parts of this country, there's kind of geographical areas. Like one of the best examples I remember was a couple of years ago when Gary Castle played St. Bridget's in an All-Ireland Club semi-final. They were technically almost neighbouring clubs, but they're different counties, different provinces. And, Desi Dolan was talking about playing for Westmeath. He never would have come up against his cousin Frankie or Roscommon. So you'd imagine Longford would love, like, a Longford-Roscommon game would be a big local derby, even though maybe it doesn't seem like that to us. Or, Longford and Cavan as well would be another one. So I think certain counties would go for it, and I think it would, like I remember seeing in hurling before the 2018 semi-final, Clare Galway, they were talking about how there's a big kind of an area there in kind of North Clare, South Galway that will be very, very close in hurling terms. So there's all these kind of geographical areas where it could work. but it's not going to tackle the issue of competitiveness. I still fear that in that format, if it came through, we'd still get some really, really lopsided games.
Which kind of brings me on to option 2, which the one you talked about already, which is like have the provinces in January, February. It's not absolutely locked down at the moment. Which, in a way, I've probably been saying that for a couple of years, that I think that the importance has been diluted, and it'd be no harm that you could open up the summer to do what you like if you played them as knockouts and did it quite quickly. Now, the only thing is, one of the options had that to get through to the All-Ireland quarterfinals, you'd have the top 4 teams in Division 1. Then the next thing you'd have is the top 2 in Division 2, and then you'd have the top teams in Division 3 and 4. And like not necessarily going through, but like let's just see. So the top team in Division 3 and 4, along with the teams placed 3rd and 4th in Division 2, would go into the qualifier games against the top 2 teams in Division 1 in the quarterfinals. It's very convoluted, but essentially what could end up happening is, if you kind of feel like I'm a team we're top of a Division 2 team, we're not quite a very good Division 1 team, you might actually strategically try and drop into Division 2, because if you get 1 or 2 there, you're actually at more of an advantage coming between 5 and 8 in Division 1. So then to further that on, you could be the 5th best team in the championship, but the 25th best team will actually get through to the All-Ireland series rather than you, because you want to get Division 3 and 4 inclusive.
Yeah, but I think that's personally, I think that's a minor enough quibble with it, because
really, you're going to end up with like the 25th best team possibly in the quarterfinal rather than the 5th.
But you could still argue that at the moment, the way certain provinces, people would argue that Kerry have an easier ride and there's less teams in Connacht. People have argued for years that a team that gets knocked out in an Ulster quarterfinal could be stronger than, say, a Munster finalist. I still think it has a lot of merit the way it's been proposed. That I think you have to kind of reward the top teams. They are the elite teams for a reason, and like there is a clear pathway there that if you progress through the divisions over the couple of years, that the advantage is given you for the following year and that, and like you're still getting a huge amount of games. You're still getting, like, people say that they just want a massive amount of games in the summer and they want games against teams of their own standard. I think it's going to achieve that, and I suppose people might say maybe the local rivalry thing is diluted. It's still in a lot of cases you get a lot of teams from the same province in the same divisions. Like, you look at last year, like Cork, Clare and Tip were all in Division 2, Mayo, Galway and Roscommon were all in Division 1, so I think it would achieve that. So yeah, it doesn't strike me as like a massive stumbling block to it.
Oh, actually, speaking of rivalries, anyway, some of the greatest rivalries in Gaelic football are teams that aren't necessarily anywhere close. Mayo, Kerry, Dublin, Mayo, Dublin, Kerry. So I don't know how relevant that is. But just then to jump on to the next point, then that the All-Ireland Senior Football Final in hurling and football, that they will be played in consecutive weekends. I think in terms of like, a lot of this should come back to the clubs. At least that is a positive step.
It is from a club point of view, but there will be a fear. You do have to look at the overall profile of the game, and you do have to look at coverage.
The promotion of the game.
Promotion of the game, yeah. Like, is there a slight danger that it's going to be kind of diluted? Let's say a football final. Let's say if there's a massive, fallout from a hurling final and it kind of dominates the news agenda till Tuesday or Wednesday. Is the football final going to get lost a little bit in coverage if it's coming up the following week? That'd be perhaps my one concern about that. Maybe that about the 2-week gap. I think they've said that, was it 2015? They reckon there was about 5 weekends between April and October, and that this plan has the capacity to triple that, the amount of weekends available to clubs during the county season. So yeah, that'd be my slight concern about that as regards if they are going to kind of push those All-Ireland finals together.
There's a lot of different underage sort of proposals, and I'll just run through them quickly as bullet points. So the Under-20 Football and Hurling Championship should be run as a national competition only with no provincial action. Actually, first of all, do you have an issue with that?
Kind of mixed views on that. I can understand the point they're making. They're talking about kind of doing a round robin, so everyone gets 3 games, because on the one hand you have certain teams, let's say they're putting a huge amount of preparation into it. They only get 1 game and they could get well beaten. Like, I think the Waterford under-20 footballers have taken some really bad beatings, for example, in Munster the last couple of years. The flip side then is that some of those provincial under-20 finals have been brilliant games. Like Cork, Kerry and Mayo, Galway in football this year. I think the hurling is it that it's going to stay in a kind of Munster Leinster, but possibly moving to a national format. Like, the Cork Tip games this year were excellent in the Munster final. So yeah, I suppose you'll still have those brilliant encounters, even though there mightn't be a trophy at stake. Still, like a Cork Kerry football game could still have a lot going for it.
Yeah, so the under-20 football then played in February and March, and the eligibility restricted to players who have not played National League that year. That kind of makes me think, will certain counties hold back certain players from playing senior halfway through the league, which may or may not be a bad thing. The CCCC will draw up for discussion a round-robin style national format, and every under-20 team, like you said, guaranteed 3 games. Under-20 hurling to be restricted to players who have not played in Liam McCarthy that year. Leinster and Munster championships to advance directly to All-Ireland. Final to be played no later than the 31st Sunday of the year, and under-17 at inter-county level should be designated as a development grade only. That's a little bit vague, but what do you think?
Not totally sure about that. I mean, it's still a massive thing, and like these are still massive occasions, like the minor finals. You saw the football this year, like the Cork Galway game in Cork Park. It's a huge amount of prestige to it. It's a huge occasion for these guys, and I understand the point they're making about developmental, but you also have to kind of think in certain instances some of these players, that'll probably be the highest that they'll achieve. They'll always have those memories, at least, of playing in these kind of big occasions and a big kind of a competitive sense. So yeah, I think it's a bit vague. I'd like to maybe see how that's going to be kind of fleshed out a little bit more. As regards the 20 hurling being restricted to players who didn't play in the Liam McCarthy Cup, I think the main thing here is you got to go one way or the other. You can't have a situation this year where, say, Jake Morris is able to play under 20 hurling for Tip, but David Clifford can't play under 20 football for Kerry. I think it should be one or the other across the board, that either we're treating under 20 just for under 20 players and keep senior players out of it, or I don't think you can have a situation where you're devising different rules for hurling and football.
In an overall sense now, underage GAA, you look at the grades going back to under 17, under 20, and even most counties at this stage are still under 18 and under 21. Do you think there's a case that this is a sacred cow that the GAA are slowly trying to kill?
Possibly. I think the under 20, I think it still worked. I still think there's been a good buzz about those games. The All-Ireland finals this year.
Mine are not so much. It feels like it's children running around the field.
Yeah, like for example, this year there was a guy playing for Cork in the All-Ireland minor football final, Owen Nash. I think it was Owen Nash's name. Yeah, he's 15 years of age. He was turning 16 later that year. Like, there is a genuine fear, I think, over the last couple of years that you're putting these guys under huge pressure, particularly the fact that these games will be played in Cork Park beforehand, and this goes back to, I suppose, bringing in the Tier 2 football and competitions like lower hurling. That would there be more merit in those games being played on All-Ireland final day? I was talking to the Limerick football captain Donal O'Sullivan this year before the Tier 2 debate, and he was saying, like an under 17 player from a big county, he's probably going to have chances later in his career to play. Like, what would it mean to, Limerick against Antrim or Limerick against Carlow to be playing as the curtainers on All-Ireland final day? I think that's the fear with the under 17, the pressure that it's putting on these guys by playing these games, these big games in Cork Park as the curtain raisers on All-Ireland semi-final and final day.
There's so much information in this report that came out on Wednesday that it's almost hard to get your head around it. It's hard to simplify it. It's hard to really get a picture of it, because they give some examples of the calendars and it's just like massive blobs of information. And actually, I'm not saying that in any critical way, because there's no other real way to put it. But is it something whereby you've just even struggled to get your head around how this will happen, how this will work?
I think it is quite complicated to kind of wrap your head around. And the other thing I think have to realise, you're not probably going to get a lot of cases get a kind of uniform positive reaction to it. I kind of think this is one of the things about the GAA. Like, everyone agrees there needs to be kind of some change to the calendar and the fixtures and all that, but maybe there has to be a bit of give and take, that you're not going to get everything you want over the line. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that let's say if people think the Munster Football Championship badly needs to be changed and isn't as valuable anymore, well, people in Ulster don't think that about their football championship, and maybe people in Connacht don't. So I suppose it's trying to strike a balance, and that's the big difficulty. There's a couple of things jumped out for me that I thought were really, really good, and I think we spoke about this before. Galway club champions going into the Munster and Leinster hurling championship, I thought that was really, really good. And one interesting one to see if it does come in is the kind of maximum of 16 clubs in county championships. There's a couple of counties now, Tip and Galway are the two that struck me in hurling, that would require a bit of significant change for that to get through in them, but I ultimately think it would be a better fit for them. When you look at I suppose Kilkenny being a big one, aren't they? Kind of 12 clubs at senior level, Kerry 8 to 10, Limerick kind of 12, it seems to be working. That some of the structures are kind of too bloated, so other things that kind of jumped out. A couple of people, like, I didn't kind of get the bottom of this, but it's a very niche thing, but I saw a couple of people giving out about it. The All-Ireland schools finals at C&D have been scrapped. A couple of people were getting on to me saying they were involved in schools and what a massive occasion that was. Didn't quite understand. I understand bringing them forward earlier in the year for the calendar purposes, but didn't quite get why you would keep them at A and B and scrap them at lower grades. That was just a minor thing. Look, it's not going to command the news cycle or anything like that. Like most of the focus is on the Sam Maguire race, really, isn't it, and whether the league and summer and all that, But there is kind of small little bits when you drill down into the info that are interesting.
Yeah, and that thing you're saying about the Galway club champions in hurling going into Munster or Leinster, what struck me then is, at the moment, there are obviously 4 teams in an All-Ireland semi-final set up, which is the Galway team, Ulster, Leinster, Munster. If you get rid of the Galway team going through, you now have 4 semi-final spots to be filled. How do you fill 4 of them if you're now going to have 3 provinces feeding into it? I don't understand that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think they've specified exactly what their format is.
Would you have an issue with that just going to an open draw? I mean, it's an amazing honour to win a provincial championship, and you can see how much it means to teams. But in some ways, I think an open draw would actually be amazing for the club championship.
I don't know. I think that the Munster and the Leinster still has massive value, and I still think because there are certain clubs that are going to come along every now and again and are going to win their province, probably aren't maybe going to win the All-Ireland, but they'll always have that. I think you'll have more memories of winning a Munster championship or a Leinster championship, like I suppose Ballyea and Mount Leinster Rangers, Bursley over this decade, as opposed to the kind of the Ballyhales and the Piercies that have dominated the provinces. But I think you'll have better memories that Munster final win than if you got to an All-Ireland semi-final, for example, in an open draw format. I don't know what the thinking is. Is it Munster or Leinster every second year play the Ulster finalists? I wouldn't think they should have a situation where the Munster beaten finalists and Leinster finalists are going forward to the All-Ireland series. I think it should probably be 3 going to 2, or is there a way maybe putting Ulster and Leinster together? Probably needs to be fleshed out, but ultimately it does seem a bit progressive, but it will require then Galway Championship to change, because they have like they have an A and a B senior, and the top few in the B go into the senior A, and regularly their final doesn't get played till the end of November, even in a year like this year when they were out in June. So for them to go into a Munster Leinster series, they'd have to, I think their own local championship programme would have to change a fair bit.
Just a couple of other quick things before finishing up. So the pre-season provincial competitions to be retained but not commence until after the 1st of January. And if option 2 for the football championship is adopted, then only pre-season hurling action to take place. I think that they should probably go anyway. And then no senior, I can come back to that in a second, no senior inter-county activity between a team's championship exit and the 1st of December every year. I think we've seen in the past how hard that is to enforce. But I'd say the one thing is, if you tell teams your players are not covered for insurance during this period, that might be the one thing that does actually force action.
It'd be the only way. I mean, there's so much anecdotal evidence, and I mean, this decade has seen, I suppose, different ways of counties can get around it and kind of circumvent those rules, like a group of players meeting up for a gym session or a kick around or whatever. I don't really know how else you can enforce it with the best will in the world. If a new manager comes in and he wants to hit the ground running, or a group of players maybe do well in a certain season, or we want to redouble our efforts for next year. Go back to the pre-season. I suppose the one thing, while I accept they don't have massive value, and they definitely shouldn't be taking place before Christmas. I mean, like, tip hurlers are down to play Sunday week. I know that's because of their team holiday. That seems a bit crazy. And the O'Byrne Cup, Walsh Cup are starting this weekend, and we're in December. It should be an off-season month really. But I suppose in January teams are going to be trying all organised challenge matches anyway. So maybe this is kind of a way of helping it. But I think they've said that there will only be 5 weekends max that these could take place on, and that they would all. I like the idea, the fact that they've said that this idea practice of starting them in December should go, that they should only start after January 1st. So at least you 1 month of the year, December, where it is completely free.
And will all of this help the club? That's the thing we're all waiting to see. The CPA stepped away from it. There wasn't really much changes. Something that they had recommended, that I've heard from the CPA, was the idea of the Tier 2 champions would go over and play New York, because New York would be out of the equation in some of these proposals. But do you think in an overall sense there's a real appetite to actually help the club? Because irrespective of whether the CPA are the ones who push it through or not, as long as it happens, that is the main thing.
I think there is an appetite, and I do think a lot of the CPA stuff was worthwhile. I thought 2 interesting points I heard the GA make yesterday, and kind of in the press conference format, was one, basically, this talk of playing every week during the league and in the spring, whatever competition you're doing, and then keeping more time in April and May free, probably isn't really realistic from a player welfare point of view, and also from a weather point of view. You can't really allow for, you're not allowing for any kind of problems where games might have to be postponed. I think that's worth considering. And the other one, this is maybe kind of a more notional thing. All this thing about, I suppose, about playing club activity in the summer and all that, there is a thing about if your season ends early for a club, I think John Horn made the point that the interest in a club kind of goes a little bit when a flagship team has gone very early in the season. I do think there is something in that like if a team kind of stays going till kind of September, October, I know that's kind of, you're trying to reconcile that with the idea of kind of playing more games in the summer and all that, but I do think there's something in that. Maybe not extending the club seasons till November and December, I think that's madness. County finals gone on that late, but I think there is something still about kind of keeping like October as the county final month, and allowing for breaks during the summer, like maybe the players to go on holidays and all that, but a lot of detail to kind of absorb, a lot to get your head around, and I suppose the challenge for them starts now, these regional seminars, trying to sell it on the ground.
We'll talk about it again, I'm sure. Thanks, Fintan.
I'd say no doubt.